Hello, I'm Steph from I Drive a Classic, and today I'm showing you a 1978 Volvo 244. I'm going to make a very bold statement and say this is probably the best car that Volvo ever made. These 240s are loved worldwide, and for me this is where Volvo's golden age of motoring really kicks off. Many cars of the 70s aren't very well thought of nowadays, but even for someone who isn't into cars, you ask them what they think of those 240s, and some people get almost misty-eyed saying, best car that Volvo ever made. So in today's video, I'm going to take you for a walk back down memory lane. We're going to talk through the history, look through the car in great detail, show you under the bonnet, and we're even going to take you out on a test drive. But before we get into any of that, let's have a message about our channel sponsor. Life is too short to drive something boring. So if you're looking for your first classic or your next classic, why not check out Bidding Classics Auctions? Whether it's something pre-war, mid-century, or maybe something newer like a retro hot hatchback, check out their website. There's a link in the description box below, or you can Google Bidding Classics Auctions. There's new stuff going on the website every single week, so why not check them out? Now let's go back to the video. Before we start talking about the ins and outs, I wanted to set the cultural landscape for you. So the landscape of Britain and where this car landed was the 1970s. Now the 70s was a really tricky time for automotive, and I think that's something that we can talk about globally, but in Britain especially. There were strikes at British Leyland. Build quality across most manufacturers in the UK and really the world was a little bit hit and miss, well, to say the least, and a decade of malaise in the world of automotive had left many buyers feeling really cheesed off and jaded. And also, it's a very interesting time because if you look at kind of the 50s and the 60s, where everyone is very wedded to their British brands, the 70s is a really exciting time because you see people become a lot more open-minded for many different reasons. You see the influx of cheap Japanese cars, you see build quality fall, and therefore people are a bit more open to exploring. So you get manufacturers like Volvo come in and things start to change. And then you see the 240 series lands. And so it just brings in more than a breath of fresh air. It takes the standards, expectations, and industry norms, and it shakes it all down and gives the buyer a series of cars in which Volvo's own words sum it up as being built for the individual. This was a car which took the world by storm and impressed everybody. Now, I know that within that 240 series, you've got different cars. I know that we could talk about the 260, but the car that we're going to focus on today is the car that we're testing. And so we're testing the 244DL today. And in fact, the 244 was the most popular of the entire range. Now, when you went and bought your 244, there were two alternative power units available, and the DL model, as we're testing here today, was fitted with a 100 horsepower DIN version of the engine, whereas the GL was fitted with the 123 horsepower version. And that was a little bit different because that had continuous injection fuel supply and a fully transistorized ignition system. However, despite the differences, both engines were 2.1 litre capacity with 4 cylinders. And then we start to get into the nitty gritty, and it's got an aluminium alloy head, and it's a cross-flow type, and it incorporates an overhead camshaft, which then offers better response and a low-speed pulling power. And I think these are things that sometimes you can miss if you're not here looking at it in person or digging deep. And it's also worth mentioning at this point that the cross-flow type cylinder head also reduces the risk of vapor locks and running on, and both engines could be run on economy grade fuel. Now that's really important because in the 70s you're still going through things like fuel crises, oil crises. There was lots going on, so when they go out with that, that's a really powerful message. Now there were different transmission units, but this particular example has been fitted with the 3-speed auto. But if you're buying this fresh from the dealership way back in 78, you could have also picked a 4-speed manual. Now, by 1978, the 244 is one of the UK's best-selling 2-litre exec cars. And the reasons for this are numerous, and I'm sure you'll be able to see as we look round, some of them are quite obvious. There were things like the quality of construction, reliability in a world where it was fairly commonplace to see quite new cars breaking down or suffering silly avoidable faults, and it also had unrivaled durability. And in fact, because people always like a good bit of basis of argument, anyone questioning that quality and durability, this is a really interesting statistic from 1979, which they put in the brochure. The Swedish Motor Vehicle Inspection Company, which was independent of Volvo, stated the probable life expectancy of any Volvo, well, being built in 1979, was 16.6 years, which made it almost 2 years longer than the next make in that grand total of what was going to last and what wasn't. And then that was benchmarked across all the available cars in Sweden at the time. It wasn't just homegrown motors. So that shows you the quality on an international scale that Volvo were achieving. Now, another fantastic thing about these Volvos was that rust proofing was acknowledged and embraced. And so when Volvo built them, they built exposed body pressings of hot dipped galvanized sheet steel. And I think they used 3.5 square meters in every single car. Now, that's a brief bit of information. I'm going to flip into the driver's seat and tell you a lot more, because this car is so hugely interesting for many different reasons. Doing this video today is filling me with so much joy, because when I was a child, we had one of the later 240s. We had, I think it was either an E or an F reg, so it was post 81, because actually that's probably something I should mention. If you've ever been in one of these and it's from 81 onwards, you notice the outside looks different, so you get a bit of a facelift, the bumpers are different, and you come inside and it's different. So this is one of the earlier ones. But that's a funny thing. Everybody I spoke to seemed to have a Volvo 240 memory of some description. So it's just filled me with a lot of joy. And the other thing is nobody had a bad word to say, which almost matches what happened at the time, because in the 1970s and really beyond that as well, this was one of the UK's most popular 2-litre executive cars. Everybody loved them, and they were loved for many reasons. I mean, when Volvo designed them, they put in their marketing material, everything has been designed with the driving experience in mind. And even though I've only driven this to a very short distance so far, that is immediately apparent. And I said to Fred, I went, do you know what? Forget the Proton. I want one of these. It's so cool. Now, as well as that, it's very well built, and it's also very safe. And a very interesting fact for you at home is when these went over to America, and not every car was a big hit in America because of safety, because of taste. We talk about the MGB going over to rubber bumper. We talk about Triumph having to make changes, Morris Minor swapping from a low light. All these things to meet American safety requirements. They were tough. They really knew what they wanted, and they had such high levels of safety. And when this landed in America, they actually said, right, this is the new benchmark for safety. So as we walk through this car, I'm going to show you some of those things that made people stand up and say, that is the car. The great thing about Volvo is when they designed that 3-point belt, gave away the plans for it, they set themselves as almost the grandfather of vehicle safety, but they didn't rest on their laurels with it. They kept it going. And that's one of the greatest things you see within this car, is just how safe it is. Now, you probably spotted already the badge on the back. This is a DL. I was reading a 1977 brochure and a 1979 brochure. So my facts in this video are kind of a mesh of those two. But I think by 78, you only had the DL and the GL, or that's all they talk about in the book anyway. But then from the 79 brochure, they talk about the GLE. So where does this sit? So at the bottom, you've got DL, and then you go GL, and then you go GLE. So with this one, you'd see them cut a few corners, but quite crucially, the corners they cut aren't the safety ones. And that's what I love about Volvo, and I love about this particular car. So there are two biggies, well, a few biggies that'll stand out to you if you've ever seen a GL. Number one is this interior. You'll note that it is a cloth interior. The GLs had, I believe it was leather upholstery, and I think the driver's seat was electronically heated, so they weren't really skipping out on that. Now, the other thing that they've cut corners on, and I think is a very clever thing to do, is the carpet, because the carpet in this is short pile, whereas if you look at a GL, it's deep pile. You've also got, I believe, tinted glass in the GL, and in this it's just standard. And as well, this is something I wish they'd kept built in, because I love a mirror, is when we fold down this passenger sun visor on a GL, that would have a little mirror on. It's also worth mentioning, because I'll forget as we go through, with this being an auto, if you've gone for the manual on a GL, you also got overdrive as well. So just one of those little things. Now let me show you how well laid out this dash is, because this is ticking so many boxes for me. So first of all, we have this rather sumptuously sized glove box, because remember, in the back we've got 21.5 cubic square feet of space in the back, which is an awful lot. But even all the compartments in here are very well sized, and in fact we even have a light in the glove box, which is these little touches, I think, that need pointing out, because they're the things that make driving and living with a car so much more pleasurable. So we'll shut that up. Now that feels quite sturdy. My one takeaway from this is, and it's the age of the vehicle, and we're looking at it with 2023 eyes, not 1978 eyes, and so we have to be mindful of that, is this plastic in this central area is quite, not brittle, but I don't think it could withstand a boisterous movement or two. It feels quite fragile in my hands. It's probably me being overly cautious, but that's why you're not going to see me muck around with stuff too much. So up here we've got a clock. Thank goodness, let's just get clocks in every old car. You've got your air vents to either side of that. Coming down, you've got your rear fog light, your rear demist, your hazard warning lights. Hurrah, because in the 70s this wasn't always in every single car, can you believe? And then we have got this. Now this for me is my favourite safety feature in the car so far. It's the fasten seatbelt sign. Now this only works on the front seats, because we've tested it with the back as well. But what happens is when you take your belt off and you turn it on, I'm going to show you it. Watch what happens with it. Now coming down from there, you've got your temperature controls and you've got a 3-speed fan. To be fair, this one doesn't feel too flimsy. It's these little switches where, because they're all quite finely made, I would absolutely hate to be the person that broke anything on this car, because it is such a nice example. Coming down from there, you've got a cigar lighter, you've got your ashtray, then just being very delicate and careful with that. You've got your stereo. Now I love an original stereo, and this is a Volvo branded tape player with a radio inbuilt. Oh, love it. Love the originality on this car. Now coming in front of us, you've got your speedo over to the left hand side there with the trip clock inbuilt. Again, you don't get that in every 70s car, and I love stuff like that. It's so handy. Now in the middle, you've got rev counter. But here's the thing, this wasn't standard on the DL, so someone's paid extra for that. Above that, you've got your parking brake. Again, to the right of that, another safety feature, because you've got your brake failure light. And over to the right hand side, you have got your temperature gauge and you've got your fuel gauge. A couple of warning lights in there as well. But as you can see, it's relatively simple, but with all the bits inbuilt that you need, safety wise and design wise, I think, to have a really great time as an owner. You've got your lights over here, again on another sturdy switch, thank goodness. And you've got your wash wipe over on that side. And of course, Ian, if you're watching, as in Ian from Hubnut and Carly, hi, did you spot the wipers on those front lights? How cool is that? I love that. That's such a Volvo thing. It's brilliant. Now coming away from that, we've also got the choke as well. You've got your indicator. And I think that pretty much sums up what we've got. It's all very simple, but everything that we need is here. And also, it feels so. This is something you can't always get through a video, and so I'm having to verbalise for you. It feels so safe and sturdy. It doesn't feel flimsy. So if you've been out in a lot of 70s vehicles, you'll know exactly what I mean when I say it feels a wee bit like a bean can on wheels, and it can feel quite tinny, and you think, oh, if I was in an accident in that, I don't know how I'd come off. With this, I honestly feel like if I had quite a bad accident, I don't think I'd come off too badly. Now I'm going to start it up and let you have a listen. So I've got the fan on there. I'm going to turn that off. You're going to be so shocked at how quiet this is. Have a listen. did have the choke out earlier. I will say one thing, the accelerator is quite heavy. I'll just rev it so you can have a listen. Remember, we've got that 100 brake horsepower as well. So you'll see as we go along, the car is never stressed out whatsoever. It is just gliding along and it's effort free. But first of all, you know where we're going? We're going to the back. Right, let's go on an adventure. Now the thing you've probably noticed there is we've come up the hill with a bit of gusto, that 2.1 litre engine firing us along the way. You'll notice that actually that auto box really keeps up with everything, and that's something to be admired and commented upon, because nowadays we would absolutely be put out if a modern auto box didn't keep up with our demands. But a lot of 70s stuff you take out and it's on auto, you tend to find that either the box is a bit sluggish and doesn't quite keep up with where you need it to be, and you're just thinking, oh god, I wish I had a manual, or it's really noisy. But in this, it feels so much more modern. And in fact, actually, Fred, who's sitting in the back filming, said to me, he went, do you know what? He went, it feels like a 90s car. It doesn't feel like a 70s car. And I would totally agree with him. It's a funny thing that this plastic trim in the middle does feel 70s, but the driving experience itself feels so much more modern than what I was expecting. If somebody said to me, you've got to do 1,000 miles in a car, this is definitely the one I would pick. This is comfier than the Proton. It honestly, it handles better than the Proton. It feels smoother. To compare it with something that I've driven a lot and that would fit in that kind of saloon bracket, I'm blown away by this. It's so quiet inside. I thought there was a piece of trim rattling earlier, but because, look, full disclosure, the doors are so heavy, we hadn't quite shut that back door properly. But now that's shut, it's really, really quiet inside. And in fact, if you want a really good comparison, it's as quiet as something like a Montego or a Maestro. And in fact, I would say it feels as good as a 90s example of something from Great Britain. It's nuts, and it feels really well built as you drive along. Now, I guess my mini criticism is when you're at slow speed, it does feel quite heavy, and when you're trying to manoeuvre in and out of parking spaces, you do need a bit of elbow grease behind you. But as you're driving along, everything starts freeing up from about 7 or 8 miles per hour, and you start getting into quite a natural rhythm with it. I particularly like how high up I'm seated. This for me is a massive plus point as someone who is a bit short, is that even though it's quite a big vehicle, it doesn't feel that wide once you're inside. Everything kind of feels like very comfortable, and it doesn't feel like you're being massively put out. And because you're quite high up, you can see to the end of the bonnet, you can see all the way around you. When I first looked at it, I didn't feel intimidated, but I definitely thought, I'm going to take a little while to get used to the spatial awareness on the car. Not so. As soon as I'm in and I'm driving, it feels like second nature. It feels like a car that I've already done 1,000 miles in. That's how confident I feel whilst driving this. If somebody sent me a test now, reverse that around the corner, I would have no trouble whatsoever. But I mean, it is a really great example. So I guess if you tested something that maybe had double or triple or even quadruple the miles that this does, having less than 40,000 on, you might find that some of the trim starts to rattle or wear. But for a car that's probably as accurate as it's going to get as to what it would have been like new, it's unbelievable. I can't even begin to tell you how much I love it. And you'll probably notice that the suspension is perfect, because as we come over these roads, and the roads in Great Britain, if you're not from here are absolutely dreadful by and large. A lot of them have been filled in or poorly filled in, or they're full of potholes, or they're uneven. So really, suspension on a car is a massive consideration, and as we come down here, it's not too hard and it's not too soft. It absorbs everything, but you still have a good feel of the road. I actually did not expect to like this as much as I have. Wow, it's the car. If you're looking for something of this era, and you're looking for something that will fit in that saloon or estate bracket, this is what you want. Oh God, it is just delightful in every single way. And I think a lot of people look at some of these older Volvos and they think they're quite safe looking, and sometimes you wrongly hear them called boring. I wouldn't give that this accolade at all. It's not boring. Design wise, it's really quite interesting. It's a nice car. It does have one annoying feature that actually the Proton has as well, is that if you open this driver's door, you get one heck of a noise. Have a little listen to this clip. Yeah, it's not the one, is it? Now I'm going to show you as we come round this roundabout. Oh, full disclosure, my indicators are on the other side and I keep flipping the wipers on. I'm going to show you, look, pull off and we come round. You'll see a lot of people think these are great big barges that you have to put so much force behind to get around a roundabout or to navigate around a corner. No, not at all. It's easy enough, and the great thing about it as well is that even though it's a big vehicle, your blind spots aren't enormous. It's the absolute perfect formula of everything you want in a classic car, and with it being quite safe as well. If you do come a cropper and you do have an accident, because accidents happen, it's not always the driver's fault, this is probably the one you'd want to be in rather than some of the the more tinny 70s stuff. So yes, this Volvo has absolutely hit the nail on the head for me today. People often ask me, what's your favourite car you've ever tested? And I would say this is now in the top 3. Oh, what a car. Now, I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have a Volvo memory, especially of this era, I would absolutely love to hear it. Leave it for me in the comments section below. And if you own one of these, you are a lucky devil indeed. Now, until next time, when we're taking out something completely different, there's quite a lot actually in the back catalogue, so I'm not sure what we're taking out. Take care and drive safely.